making a video to a guy called Glenn Stigner. Well, Glenn anyway. Yeah, I think I got that part right anyway. So anyway, this is just a video to Glenn, I suppose. So really no nonsense about too long a video or to this or to that. He's talking about antinatalism. I'm going to try to have a conversation. I mean, I do try to have this conversation thing. The point is it just gets kind of rude, and that's the way it goes. But I don't start it. Yeah, I know that's a lame excuse, but I really don't. So anyway, let's see what he's got to say. I haven't played this yet.
My second YouTube video in a single day.
Wow.
Been pretty productive this spare day, and I thought I'd keep my promise to segue into this discussion of antinatalism, which I said at the end of my last video. So that was an economics discussion. This is going to be antinatalism.
Yeah, they both got doom written all over them. I mean, the systems are stupid.
A pretty fascinating topic that I find sort of around going on in and around YouTube and other video environments, and you find it sort of if you're into the if you look around the atheist forums and videos and so on, you suddenly bump into this.
You know, it's really not atheist, it's really just the non-God, right? I mean, if you don't believe in God, you're obligated to come up with some other explanation regarding life, and you're probably going to fall on the idea of evolution. And when you really look at evolution, you say, what is this? It's a DNA molecule replicating for no good reason. Why should I assume that it's doing something useful or purposeful or good? You know, that it just fell on good all by itself, the little DNA molecule did. No, I don't think so.
It's pretty fascinating. I mean, the way I look at it is that the thoughts that antinatalism are founded on, those I don't find disturbing or shocking at all. Because...
Yeah, I guess that's, I got this Buddha guy over here. So, a little golden Buddha. Well, I guess it's brass, but whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's Buddha 2.0. It's just taking long ununderstood concepts of just what the hell are we caught up in, kind of, observations, and just saying, well, we better do something. Let's figure it out. Instead of, like, Buddha just kind of stopped, and said, well, whatever, I can't do anything about it.
Antinatalism in one fashion can simply be seen as the ultimate, sort of the end point that you would go on a discussion of birth control, for instance. It seems like it's the ultimate birth control solution.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't, yeah, sorry. That's just doesn't really have anything to do with it at all. Yeah, no.
Yeah, anything that would, I'm sure we all have those thoughts that go on in our heads from time to time about the ridiculousness of this life game, and wouldn't it be better, blah, blah, blah.
Well, blah, blah, blah. It's sort of important because that's the big question, right? And what's the big answer? So when you have those moments where you say, oh, I'm sort of seeing the preposterousness of it all, what kind of mechanism does your brain go through for you to say, well, I'll just blah, blah that? You see what I'm saying? I mean, if you take the question at all seriously, I'm just saying I don't think you can come up with a serious answer to get yourself out of there. I mean, the only way you get out of that pit of reality is through some sort of nonsense. Like, I'll just go buy a lottery ticket and pay no attention.
Would it be better to commit suicide or something, but wouldn't it be better to just stop the life from going on? Well, I did see one other, I saw a lot of YouTube videos on this, but one commenter, someone who was critical of antinatalism, at least made the common sense statement that he didn't think he'd ever see. In other words, we have nothing to worry about. This thing will actually never happen
Yeah, right. So that's your sensible comment, is some sort of projection from the soothsayer who says he knows what the truth is. He knows that Gandhi was a failure, and him at any point in history, he would have figured out what was going to be and what wasn't going to be. I think it's sort of just on its face. It's stupid to say that if any number of people can acquire a belief, then you can times that times 10, or you can times that times 1,000, or you can times that times 1,000,000 without straining your brain any. It's just a matter of circumstance. And to say that somehow you know that through some sort of evidence is just nonsense.
Reality. It's just human beings and other mammals and animals, we're not built that way.
Well, again, can't you see how that's kind of a silly argument? What were we built like 40,000 years ago? Well, let's go back 1,000,000. Look at what we were built like 1,000,000 years ago. Look at what we were built like 40,000 years ago. Look at what we were built like 20,000 years ago when the first Native Americans were populating America. The American continent. The Americas. And then you go back 10,000 years and civilization is starting to rise. What we were built like then. I mean, it's not a sensible argument to say that human beings are this thing and they can't be anything else but this thing. Because they've never been that throughout their whole history. They evolve. And if you look at our last 100 years, look at the last 100 years, even the last 200 years, and look at the change in how the human is perceiving reality, and then come back to me and tell me how you say human beings are this and they can't be anything else.
We just start. In my view, there is a fail-safe mechanism that prevents, there's a fail-safe mechanism in biology that prevents even the most cunning and intelligent beings from overstepping and tampering with.
Yeah, well, again, this is just more, what was the fail-safe for Tyrannosaurus rex? What was the fail-safe for all dinosaurs? Most species that ever existed in the history of life on Earth no longer exist. 99.99% of them are extinct. All right, the fail-safe wasn't fail-safe. And again, not to acknowledge, the simple truth that we are not our biology anymore. We are our understanding and our intellect. We invented the condom. People have all kinds of ways of expressing their sexuality now that have nothing to do with reproduction. There are civilizations right now who, if it wasn't for importation of population, would have negative population growth. So this argument, again, isn't founded on anything rational or logical. It's just some sort of naysayer kind of, oh yeah, I don't think so. Well, that's not an argument. It's not an argument I should have to take seriously. And you called it a good comment? No, I'm sorry.
Their own existence. That's basically my philosophy about antinatalism, is that it's an interesting idea, but the notion that it could ever actually happen is just,
Yeah, well, like I said, you could go back in history and you could go talk to the typical chauvinist male and show him the modern America with women in, business suits and such. There's no, whatever. So you don't think that there's any evolution in human perception. Because I'm going to argue to you that it is through the evolution of human perception, understanding, knowledge base, that it is an inevitable conclusion that they're a smart person. The smarter you are, the easier it is to see the game board, to see that the game doesn't have a purpose, that it doesn't accomplish anything outside of its own creation of a mess. It doesn't do anything but clean up the messes it makes, the needs it creates. and that there's a fundamental zero-sum nature to it, where the best you can do, perfection would be to be pretty much cleaning up your own poo, which isn't really much of an accomplishment if you're going to judge it by some kind of standard that has to justify a deprivation. And the deprivation seems, you want to talk about something that's intrinsic to the nature, that's kind of intrinsic to the nature, is make you want it. All right? The value isn't in the stuff we're chasing. The value is in our desire.
It's ridiculous, really. I mean, but since I said I would talk about it, let's talk about it. In other words, one side of me is saying, well, the reality is that human beings just aren't built to be able to see this thing through. I mean, you know...
Again, that's just such a silly notion. I mean, obviously, I was built to see it. Schopenhauer was built to see it. Kevorkian was built to see it. Benatar has been built to see it. And all these other people commentating on YouTube are certainly built to see it. And maybe it requires a little bit of... it has to kind of pie you in the face a little bit for you to be able to get there. But I could make the same argument that for most people, they aren't able to overcome the propaganda of their youth. You know, they're born into a religion and born into a whole psychology of what life means and what's valuable, and they get sucked right into it, and they can't go anywhere from that starting point. But we do know that just a few little, you throw a little bit of a marble in their way, a little something for them to trip over in that process, and they will be liberated. Their intelligence will be liberated, and they will look at the world. And I'm going to argue to you, if anybody honestly looks at the world, they're not going to draw any other conclusion but that, yeah, this is really too messy. It's too delicate. It's too fine a thing for our clumsy hands to control. We're just not competent to play with something this valuable.
The other side of me says, okay, let's have the discussion. It's an idea, and we can talk about it. So yes, pain and suffering are real. We know that, you know, in almost any kind of society we can have, capitalist, socialist, libertarian, this, that, liberal, conservative, capitalist, anything else. So, you know, no matter what happens, there's always going to be that. The way human life works out is that the majority of the people get screwed over, have it hard, that's just the reality. And that certain other people who have financial or whatever other benefits that they have can satisfy their sentient life at the expense of your.
Yeah, well, let's also understand that that's not really what they're doing. They're not getting satisfied. We can see it. They're not satisfied. They get $1 million, they want $2 million. They get $2 million, they want $20 million. They got $20 million, they want $20 billion. We see their psychology, and they're not satisfied. They haven't accomplished anything. They're just playing the game from a different role play, you know. And so they're users. So they're kings and bishops and queens and knights. And, yeah, they'll sacrifice pawns to get what they want, but they're still on the game board. They're still going to die. They're still going to face the same harsh realities. And they're going to face it, in a sense, being so delicate and so incapable of facing reality. You know, that's why in 29, you know, they're all flying out of windows, is because they couldn't face reality. Like, what, you mean I'm going to have to get a real job? Yeah, no, you mean I'm going to have to stand on a bread line? No, they couldn't do that. So I'm not trying to provoke any sympathy for them, but I'm just saying let's understand they're not winning either, and it's just a bad system. So you can change systems, and again, you're going to talk like everything's inevitable, like every experiment has been tried, and you know it can no matter what way you do it, it's still going to be this, this, and this. And I'm saying, well, that's just crap. Okay, that's the argument from. I say so because it was once, or whatever you want to call it. No, there's experiments that haven't been done yet, and there's ways of organizing human beings that I think can be quite civilized.
That's life. that's life that goes beyond systems. It goes beyond capitalism, governments, Western, Eastern culture, anything that you can think of.
Well, again, it's just not all in the same pile of crap, and it's, like I said, it's just an engineering solution, and human beings are just really bad at it. Okay, they're really bad at doing the right thing for the right reasons, because, you know, number one, that takes too much work, and it often means they have to let go of their traditional bullshit. You know, they have to progress. They have to move to a new future, and they can't take their blankie with them, their old, ragged, silly notions and ideas with them.
The human reality of this kind of domination, it's just always been with us. So one ought to look at ways of, you know, I'm not going to go into, you know, ways that we should organize our lives. I'm not going to go into a discussion of that. That's not antinatalism, but rather the state of mind that you're in that would make you constantly think about antinatalism.
Well, you don't have to constantly think about it. All you have to do is think about it when you're asked direct questions about what you think life is and what kind of future we should move towards. That's not that complicated. I mean, the game is we just, all we have to do is incrementally heighten the burden that people have to achieve for social acceptance before they have children. So oblige them to come up with a rational reason to do it, not a selfish reason. Provoke some sort of enhancement of that standard. And as that standard increases, antinatalism will become an inevitable consequence of human existence.
That's the thing I really want to kind of get at. Basically, it's sort of self-contradictory on a big. It's a major.
Well, like I say, you can say it's self-contradictory. It's this, it's that. The bottom line is that people aren't. You know, replacement population in civilizations on this planet is not taking place. There is not exponential population growth anymore, and there is, in fact, population decline. So the average two people are not producing two people anymore, because this philosophy, in one form or another, has possessed them. They've seen no need to invest in that future. They see life as whatever it is, but they're not saying they're going to bake a cake themselves. All right, they'll eat the cake that's here, they'll play the game they've been stuck with, but they're not going to sit there and make new pawns to get put on the board to play the stupid game. So that's already a winning philosophy, not a losing philosophy. The problem is the minority of people who do the breeding breed in excess of their replacement population, and so again, it's not that this is a majority problem. This is a minority problem. It's the minority that are deciding the future, and maybe the majority should say, we're really not going to let you keep doing that.
Self-contradiction, that to say we have these needs, but I mean, the fact is every living organism on the planet has needs. You know, there seems to be a kind of big self-contradiction even in the contemplation of this antinatalism.
Well, there is in the way you talk about it. You know, this antinatalism stuff, and you do this vague idea. I mean, come up with a metaphor to understand what it's about. Okay? It's not about being Frankenstein's monster. It's not about being afraid of fire. It's not about the psychology of Frankenstein monster. It's not about anything to do with Frankenstein monster, except that Frankenstein monster acknowledges that he wouldn't make another Frankenstein monster. That's antinatalism. Stop Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. That's what antinatalism is about. So again, all this conversation about how we live being antinatalist is quite irrelevant to the subject, which is, should Dr. Frankenstein be allowed to keep making Frankenstein monsters?
First of all, no, any intelligent person is going to be able to is going to easily see that the conversation itself just isn't productive to our condition. It's not productive to the human condition.
Yeah, whatever. Again, so you pulled that out of what, rabbit ass. I'm, sorry, but I mean, this is insulting argumentation. Come on, you can't do better than this. I say so is all you're saying here. This isn't. You don't have any logic to support that argument.
Like I said, the fail-safe mechanism. Life is going to reproduce itself in any way, shape, or form that it...
Well, whatever, right. So just ignore the existence of the condom. Ignore the argument I've already made to you, which is that many civilizations already have reverse population, opposite if they have population decline in their natural, by their component. So again, your argument is not proven by the evidence.
And including human beings. It's just, it's much better. See, people I think who had a lot of faith in the idea of Planned Parenthood. It's this idea that we as human beings...
Look, the subject really isn't about controlling population growth, okay? That's a separate subject, controlling population growth. They have names for that. This subject is whether or not there is sufficient reason to manufacture pieces to keep playing a game that logically doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. It's a DNA molecule replicating. If you believe in evolution, you sort of have to accept the fact that this is stupid.
Through the birth control pill and all this other stuff, we can technologically solve this problem of out of control natalism. And that was those.
Yeah. Well, antinatalism is basically saying all natalism is out of control natalism. It's all dumb, stupid, reckless, irresponsible, dangerous, pointless, excessively risk-averse nonsense that serves no purpose but to satisfy some selfish need and is intrinsically opens the door to harm and opens the door to no productive accomplishment.
Kind of attitudes were highly touted. I remember back in the 70s. That's when I grew up from my all through my teens. That was the 70s. I remember those kind of almost arrogant talks, about our power to technologically keep in, whip it in shape and keep, whip life in shape is what this whole thing was about. And that's not how life works. Life is messy.
Well, again, this is just talk. I mean, the fact is that we have, in many ways, controlled nature. I grew up in the same time, and I saw us land on the moon, and I saw us, conquer the moon, and the Hoover Dam. I walked on it a couple of times. We're capable of making a really nice place for human beings to live. We're capable of it, but living is the problem.
Yeah, the same people who were talking about all this, birth control stuff ended up, having kids through other circumstances they couldn't control, didn't know that they were going to meet this person or that person. Yeah, that's what happens in life.
Yeah, well, whatever. Maybe that's your life experience. I drew the conclusion when I was 10 years old that I knew damn well I ain't going to have no kids, and I haven't had any kids. So, whatever. And again, I'll argue the overall American population is not booming. All right, it's the import population that keeps our population growing, but the domestic population is not growing. I mean, it's hard to get rude here. I mean, the Native American population, second-generation Native American, whatever that is, the non-Native Americans, The point is, the recent imports are doing all the breeding. The old Americans aren't.
John Lennon even made the comment that even though it's not physically true, in a metaphysical way of speaking, we are all conceived in the back seat of a Buick on Lover's Lane. That was his comment, or something like that.
Yeah, again, this is just kind of meaningless, okay? Because as technology improves and as social responsibility is heightened, which it sort of, kind of, in many ways has been, the less and less of that is something that's going to be embraced by society. I mean, the 60s were a reaction to the 50s, all right? So understand, it was like, you know, it's the first time driving kind of thing. And yeah, you have accidents when you're first time drivers. But as those memes evolve and as they mature, that's less and less likely to be the outcome.
It's that life is just messy and will reproduce itself anyway, regardless of whether we have some kind of technological plan to make it better.
Well, again, I'll argue, okay, that in many more educated cultures, life is declining. That's the exponential curve is downward, not upward.
So it's much better to just simply take the point of view that life is going to go on anyway, whether you plan it or not. And
well, like I said, it's just to fall back on we can't escape being ignorant assholes. Human beings can't escape that. Bullshit. All right, I escaped it without even trying. I mean, I didn't even try to escape being an ignorant asshole. I mean, come on. This is just such a lame excuse.
It's best just to step in and try to help life rather than look at it scowlingly from a distance.
Yeah, well, that's not the point, is to scowl at it. It's to realize that there's different ways to approach a problem. Sorry, I'm going to get angry, but this is just bullshit. I mean, you're saying, no, just keep putting Band-Aids on the wound. Keep putting Band-Aids on the wound. You can't cure anything. You can't cure diseases, you silly fuck. I mean, that kind of attitude. I mean, you know, it took Dr. Ehrlich 10 years of doing experiments to cure syphilis. 10 years or something like that anyway. 7, I don't know. A lot of time, okay? A lot of fucking work. Every day. And so, yeah, some naysayer like you, and he had naysayers like you. All right? They tried to destroy him because they thought what he was trying to do was evil. You know, curing diseases with chemistry. Oh, what an evil motherfucker. He was Monsanto of his day. Right? And so he had to endeavor to persevere to get past you naysaying, nitpicking, motherfucking vacant brains who sit there and just throw out the platitude, you can't stop Mother Nature. Yeah, you can. All it takes is an idea and a fair argument. And so if I'm going to argue with something, what I'm going to argue is the failure of the human race is they're too pussy to make a real argument. To get in there, make a real argument defending their bullshit, or else walk out in disgrace, humiliated properly, and say, yes, you're right, I pulled it out of my fucking ass, I have nothing, I have no fucking clue what I'm talking about. It's probably better that somebody like you makes decisions, because guess what? I just pull shit out of my ass.
Try to get away from it. That's just not going to work.
Says
so you want to step in where you see... When you have situations where you see life is plentiful and out of control and can't take care of itself, it's much better to step in and help than it is to scowl at it.
Why, yeah, we should have helped save the dinosaurs so Tyrannosaurus could still rule the world. I mean, what? This is nonsense. You don't just save life for the sake of saving it. You don't save an idea for the sake of saving it. This is, again, you're just back to the DNA dumb. I'll just replicate for the sake of replication. I won't justify the replication. I won't explain what point there is in making the Frankenstein monsters. I'll just keep making them because that's what everybody's been doing. And I certainly don't want to do something different than what everybody's been doing. I mean, come on.
From a great big ivory tower distance. That's just the truth of it. Rather than, only helping... This would be like,
This is a nonsense argument. The subject is antinatalism. You want to talk about whether we should pet little kids on the head and say, very good, Junior, you didn't poop your pants today. Yeah, okay, let's have a conversation about whether we should encourage people not to stick knives in their fucking eyes. Fine. Okay, great. But that's not the subject.
Any of you out there that are fathers, and I'm both a biological father and a stepfather. I have 2 children, but they are, they don't live with me. They grew up. They're both grown up now, but their daily living was mostly with their mother growing up. And I, in turn, started a relationship with another person who was also a parent, and I'm helping to raise her kid or kids, however you want to look at it.
Right, so that makes you some kind of authority on doing it the wrong way, right, fella? Man, jeez.
So, rather than me it's just a change of, it's a frame of mind.
No, it's a frame of stupidity. Don't be calling it what it is. It's not a frame of mind. It's a frame of ignorance, a frame of nonsense, a frame of, you could even say, foolish youth. But don't sit there and talk about it like it's a frame of mind, all right? It's obviously body. It's not mind. It's obviously emotion. It's not mind. It's nonsense. It's babble. It's ignorance. Don't insult the word mind by associating it with ignorant, stupid, reckless, sloppy behavior.
You say, well, look, life, I love my biological kids. I would do anything I can do to make sure that they have safe, healthy...
Well, I thought you only had one biological kid. Well, whatever.
...and productive lives. But I also care about, the child of my wife, that I'm a stepfather for. Because that's a sentient creature that needs care too. And
yeah, well, guess what? It really doesn't matter whether you're married to a kid's parent, biological parent. It shouldn't even decide whether you like or dislike a child or whether you love them. Isn't even that a silly standard? Shouldn't it just be any kid I recognize as a sentient being in need of care? But again, this is not the subject of antinatalism. This isn't even close to the subject of antinatalism. The implication of this drivel is that somehow you're arguing that antinatalists don't pet the cat, okay, and they don't encourage the child, and that they just constantly say, you should be dead, you little fuck. That's not what they're arguing, shithead. Sorry, but this is just goddamn idiotic. It's a fucking grotesquely nonsensical implication.
Have anything to do about this child being your biological child. That is an ego thing. That is I want to carry on my genes thing. It has and even if you had a big company or something or a lot of money to give to the next generation, why should it have to be this?
Yeah, your theft. Yeah, give your stolen goods. Yeah, right. Apportion them based on genetics.
That's clearly just an ego.
Yeah, well, clearly.
Principle, that to carry on the family name or whatever. It's got no bearing on reality. It has no bearing on female nature.
Right, and if you just take that one tiny little step further, there's antinatalism. So you've just acknowledged that it's just ego bullshit. Well, guess what? The whole thing of having kids is just ego bullshit. It's just bullshit. You can let go of it that easily. You can go take a trip to Egypt. Walk on the pyramids. You don't have to birth no babies to have a life.
Sure. At all. So it's just it's a male game. It's a male pass on my genes silly game.
Well, no, and it's also a female game where I want something to unconditionally love me, and I guess the only thing I can fool into thinking I'm worth anything, I guess, is a dumb little baby. So I guess I'll have to have a baby, so I'll have something that can unconditionally love me, because anything that knows who the fuck I am will say, "You're not lovable, you skanky whore." Yeah. So I guess that's psychology we throw in the toilet, too. We could say, yeah, maybe that shouldn't be running the world.
That man play. But, yeah, it should have no bearing on the people that you care for. And the ultimate, I mean, you know, it's
again, yeah, the people you care for, like this again has anything to do with the subject of whether or not people should perform Frankenstein experiments, whether they have the competence to create living beings and be responsible for their welfare. Yeah, I don't think so.
Fine, if antinatalism is a concept that sort of helps you see certain things more clearly, that's fine. But to live this philosophy day by day.
Well, whatever. I don't exactly know how you live a philosophy like this day by day by day. I mean, if my philosophy is that, you know, the moon's made of cheese, we should go and eat it, I don't think I'd have to live it every day. I could probably take a few days off now and then. So this is, again, what is antinatalism doesn't say anything about your daily life unless every day you're saying, I want to have a kid, I want to have a kid, I want to have a kid. If you're saying that every day, well, then you're going to have to use antinatalism to stop you. But otherwise, antinatalism is just like any other thing you can believe in, like equal rights or, you know, lower taxes, or any other philosophical idea. You'll do what you can in your life to see your philosophy actualized in the world, but that's all. That's the only way it impacts you personally. It doesn't change the game you're playing right now. The question of whether we should keep making the board and keep making the pawns and keep disposing of them and keep recycling the game has absolutely pretty much nothing to do with how you personally play the game.
They can't possibly be productive. You'd be better off. I mean, one of life's main goals should be to...
Oh, this ought to be good, right? I just love this. Now, this one ought to be good, right? So this guy's going to tell me what life's main goal should be. It's a replicating molecule. Its only goal is to keep a bunch of this biology crap, okay, covering the Earth. And it doesn't care whether the biology is a fungus. It doesn't care whether it's grasshoppers, or tyrannosauruses, great white shark. It doesn't care what the biology is. It's just saying, fight it out. There's going to be losers and there's going to be winners. And so from the DNA's perspective, it's all win.
Live in a loving relationship with another human being.
Whatever. I mean, where do you pull that out of what? Some sort of traditional notions of what we are. All right, that's just more saddling people. Just you raise them into those kinds of notions, and they'll have to live those kinds of notions. But you could just as easily raise somebody to have a completely different perspective on what their sexuality is, what their fellowship with other human beings is. All of that stuff could be completely different. And now that we have this whole virtual world that people can live in, I would almost argue that human beings could live without even ever meeting another human being their whole fucking life.
At least start there, because what this should be about, life is both about the journey and the destination. Both are important. The journey is not more important than the destination. The destination is not more important than the journey.
Whatever. So you're going to have to give this, that. You're going to bring up that, with 2 minutes left.
So what what one can do is you place yourself in the frame of mind that says, hey, a shared experience with another human being is what you want. This is what.
Well, again, why would you assume that is what somebody wants? I mean, that's just so, whatever. I mean, that's just so insulting to all the diversity that's out there. No, your obligation is to live a productive life. Now I have to define is what the friggin' values are. What's the gasoline and what's the movement? What's the productive work? Well, that we can know it's productive to eliminate or prevent suffering. So, yeah, you win brownie points for doing that. And we know the consumption is where you cause suffering. I mean, that's sort of a given. Your own suffering or something else's suffering. So the economics aren't that tricky. And so the game is to get to the end of your life eliminating more harm than you caused. That's the destination. Now, the journey part is, yeah, you try to have as good a time as possible while you're doing that. But if good time means you pull the blinds down and you ignore the consequences of your train, or you don't pay attention to what the train is running over as you're journeying, you don't look at the oar you're paddling the boat with and realize it's made out of dead people. I mean, if you're going to cheat the journey, then that's bullshit. So, I mean, this is a little more complicated than just throwing out these platitudes.
Why we're doing these YouTube videos. I mean, this may be a large part of why people incessantly do these YouTube videos. They're looking for, they're reaching out to other human beings. Ideally, you want that in your personal life. You want another human being there with you.
Well, whatever. Again, you're telling me what I want. No, what I want, I've articulated as an antinatalist. What I want is freedom. All right? I'm Frankenstein's monster, and I'm saying I know how I got here. I know how these other Frankensteins got here. And if I don't do something about the thing producing the Frankensteins, I'm doomed to do the whole fucking stupid game all over again. And I'm saying that's just logical to say, well, as we're journeying, maybe we should journey by the castle with a torch, and we should burn that fucker down.
And you don't have to have children to make your life meaningful. Many people choose not to.
Most people choose not to. Most people.
That's fine. But like John Lennon said, there's no point in complaining about the planning of the past because there was none. Right, you were
Well, whatever. Again, there's plenty point in complaining about irresponsible behavior. All right, so John Lennon wasn't exactly Einstein, okay? He was a fucking guy who wrote okayish songs. I mean, come on. It's okay to complain about drunk drivers. It's okay to complain about somebody who's got a transmittable disease who doesn't tell other people about it. It's okay to complain about reckless or irresponsible or basically scumbag behavior. And if you're fucking creating living things and you haven't made, if you're a bird and you're laying eggs and you haven't made a nest, then you're a stupid motherfucker and everybody should complain about you.
That out into the world, conceived in the back seat of a Buick on Lover's Lane, or at least that's a sort of.
Yeah, it's a pile of shit. Okay, my parents deliberately had kids. They didn't have them in any fucking back seat of any fucking cars, and they did it because it was the tradition. Everybody else was doing it, and they didn't have the the philosophical independence to step out of that tradition. And if they had their lives to do over again, they would have erased that decision, and they would have lived their life traveling the world and doing interesting things instead of, basically being a slave to, 4 kids for 18 years.
Metaphorical way that you could look at your life, no matter how, no matter how, next to godliness you think your parents were or everything. Yeah, they bumped you out in the back seat of a car.
Well, like I said, I think that's just kind of it's not an accurate metaphor, and it wouldn't matter anyway. If your argument is John Lennon was too stupid to figure out how babies are made, and that he was too stupid to realize that it's kind of a responsibility. I don't remember John Lennon having kids when he was 17. Did he have some kids when he was 17? I don't know. Did he? I don't remember hearing about them. So I guess he didn't do it that way. So I guess the song isn't about anything real. I guess it's just a fucking song. And maybe you shouldn't take a philosophical argument out of a fucking song.
I love her saying in the 50s or whatever metaphor you want to use, that.
Well, I'd like to use a metaphor that has some relation to the reality. Yeah, that would be good.
You'd probably be better off just seeing it that way, right? And don't blame some. It's almost like people are blaming. It's like blaming.
Yeah, blaming people for being reckless, insensitive, sloppy, stupid motherfuckers. Oh yeah, don't blame them for that. There's nothing they could do about that. No, there's not they couldn't have, it's not like they had a choice, but the point is the argument is in their face. Here it is. The people are making the argument now. You maybe 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years ago you had an excuse if you didn't know about these other philosophers in the world. But there's the internet age, the information's out there, and if you're going to say I'm competent to make these decisions that will affect the lives of other people, and you just can't even muster. There isn't one little program in your stinking, lousy, crappy shit for brain that says, well, maybe I should make sure I'm competent. Maybe I'll test myself and see if I know what planet I'm on and have some sort of realistic notion about probable outcomes. I mean, come on. Yeah, that's criticizable. If people that stupid, okay, should be in cages.
When you're just blaming a force of nature, it kind of makes no sense. But anyway, those are my thoughts on antinatalism.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't know if I'd pay anything for those. Kind of just a cheap, sloppy, blah, blah. Yeah. Not really, nothing intellectually or logically challenging in that argument. So, what can I say? I find it lacking and disappointing. So, there you go.